You are watching and listening to Chris and Leicester Till I Die TV on YouTube and your favourite podcasts.
Right, Chris.
All right. Good evening, good day, good morning, good afternoon, good night, goodbye. Hello. Welcome along to LTID TV from Leicester Till I Die for Sloppy Seconds. It is the second show we've done today because we did an earlier one because it looks like we have got our new manager. But that was for a show then. That isn't for the show tonight. Somebody said earlier, actually, when they watched that intro, it's the new intro, and they said it was with the film intro at the start that they thought they were going to be going to the movies and watch a film. I guess if it's Leicester, it would be a carry-on film, wouldn't it? It'd be carry on and make another mistake. Oh, who knows with Leicester? It's a roller coaster ride. One thing you know with Leicester, it will never be all right on the night. But look, I've got a great guest in today. Thank you so much for joining. Please get your questions into the chat because we can try and we'll put as many as we can to the gentleman. It's Kieran Maguire, a British academic, it says on his Wikipedia page, author and broadcaster. Sounds very posh, doesn't it? He specialises in the accountancy of association football. If you've watched Sky Sports, listened to Talk Sport, or even read Leicestershire Live and the Leicestershire Mercury, anything to do with football and finances, this is the gentleman that we'll have had on. This is the gentleman that we'll be talking to. He's also a Brighton fan, so you might want to get one or two questions in about Potter. Why isn't he coming? Well, we'll never know, will we? We'll never know. But it's like I said, you know, we've asked him, I think it's 3 times now, how often do you ask a girl out before you give up and move on to a mate? That doesn't sound right, really. I shouldn't have said that, should I? But look, welcome along. We'll bring him in. This is Talking Foxes Finances. And we're going to say good evening to Kieran. Good evening, Kieran. Thank you so very much for joining us.
Good evening, Chris. Thank you very much for the invite. Looking forward to this.
Indeed. Well, as is indeed in the chat, we've got Andreas, who he's saying looking forward to this as well. And if anybody, by the way, I should point out, if anybody's worried about missing the Scotland game, that doesn't kick off till 8 o'clock. And of course, because it's Scotland playing, they'll also be kicking off at 8:15, 8:45, 9. And every time they concede a goal, I'm sorry, it's banter, England and Scotland and all that. And Matthew says, hello, Chris and Kieran as well. Kieran, you also, of course, present a podcast, don't you? The Price of Football.
Yes, I do that with comedy writer Kevin Day. To both of our very much surprised. It's been quite successful. We've had over 15 million downloads to date.
Oh.
And we're fortunate. We had Trevor Birch, the head of the EFL, on the show last week. We talked to players, managers, people from the industry about the business of football. So we're not there to talk about 4-4-2. We're not there to talk about VAR. But if you want to get perhaps a better understanding of how the transfer system works in terms of conjunction with FFP and PSR and that stuff, we try to explain it as you would do to your mates down the pub, and that's what we are. We're just a couple of mates who happen to have a chat.
Well, that's what I'm hoping for, because a lot of it is over my head. But there is a link to the price of football in the description below on YouTube. So if that's something that interests you, just click on that link below. At the end of the show, don't go off and start watching it now, because we want you to stay here. But at the end of the show, nip off and check it out. The price of football. It's at POF_POD. Well, obviously, let's talk about the finances. Leicester in a bit of a mess, aren't they?
I think they're in a complex position. They lost a lot of money in their two most recent seasons as far as the Premier League was concerned. And I suspect had they stayed up, potentially they could have been up on a charge from the Premier League itself, but they were deemed to be outside the jurisdiction of the Premier League. And then at the same time, because the offences took place in 3 years within the Premier League, they were deemed to be outside of the jurisdiction of the EFL as well, when I think the EFL wanted to take things a stage further. So they're sort of in this no-go land as far as the authorities were concerned. But looking at the numbers, and you must always look at the numbers with a degree of caution. The losses were very high. Leicester had the highest wage bill outside of what we refer to as the Big Six. So that's higher than Newcastle, higher than Villa, higher than Leeds United in 22-23. They were paying £116 in wages for every £100 that came through the door. And you don't have to be a finance specialist to realise that's not looking great. It's before you stick on the floodlights. Before the mower is filled with diesel, whoever goes into the mower by the groundsman and so on. The club was already losing money. They've had to rely on player sales to dig them out of that to an extent, but it's not really been enough. So we wait to see what happens. And at present, I think they are still a member of the EFL officially until they give up their share in the EFL and they swap shares with. It'll be one of Sheffield United.
I think we are now a member of the Premier League because the transfer embargo has been lifted.
Okay. Yeah.
Which would mean we've obviously and we had a vote on the VAR as well. So I'm presuming we are now Premier League. All right. I don't want to come across, and I did a show yesterday, two fans down the pub with a Bournemouth fan, and he was actually defending Leicester more. I mean, my attitude is, look, if we have broken these rules, then yes, we will. We deserve to be punished, and we will be punished. What gets me, and everybody says this, and Matthew said this sort of straight away. It does seem to be one rule for one and one rule for the other. You look at like Nottingham Forest, Everton. We hear all the time about Man City and Chelsea, but we never hear about any of these. All right, if Man City have got 115 charges, just get one or two out the way to get the ball rolling.
I think the issue, if Manchester City have broken the rules, if you do just charge them for one or two offences, I think the chances are that the amount of money involved would not be enough to necessarily mean that they were in breach of the PSR. So you get this crazy situation whereby, it's a bit like being on the motorway and driving at 72 miles an hour. You shouldn't really be doing it. You could get prosecuted for it, but the chances are that if you do, you're going to get a finger wagging or a very small fine. Yeah. Whereas I think the approach taken by the Premier League is that if we take a look at these charges, and there's actually more than 115. If you go through the small print The Premier League itself was so anxious at the time to prosecute the Premier League because it couldn't even add up its own charge sheet. There's actually it's closer to 130.
Right.
If you're able to successfully get a large number of those to hit, then I think the consequences could be very significant. At the same time, Manchester City are saying, and they would say this, let's be honest, they're saying, well, we are very confident of successfully defending those charges.
Mm. Do you think, I mean, there's this rule now, or this rumour that they're going to be changing the rules again so that it's a fine rather than a points deduction? So, I mean, as a fan of one of the not fanciable club, the smaller club, whatever you want to call us, am I being a bit cynical and thinking, well, when that happens, that's when Manchester City will get charged because they can afford to pay whatever the fine is?
I genuinely don't think that will be the case. And the reason for that is that it's actually in the best interests of Liverpool and Manchester United and Arsenal and Spurs. Yeah, it's in the interest of the other members of the Big Six for Manchester City to either have a huge points deduction or to be expelled from the Premier League itself. Now, I think the latter is highly unlikely. And the reason why I say that is that it looks like the Manchester City charges are going to be heard in the autumn, and we will probably not find out the verdict until the spring of 2025. So you can't suddenly just say in February 2025, Manchester City are expelled from the Premier League, because what are they going to do for the next 3 months? They can't physically go and play in the EFL. And then you've got the issue of, well, what about all of the results that they've had to date in that season? Do they get wiped? Yeah, Manchester City are not going to be expelled from football. Let's get that clear. They could face very, very significant penalties. I don't think that they will be just financial penalties. If they have not cooperated, and one of the issues in respect to Manchester City is the charges of non-cooperation with the Premier League. I think for those charges they could have a financial penalty because it's nothing to do with football. And if you take a look at what happened with Manchester City and UEFA, Manchester City ended up paying I think it was a 10 million euro fine, again for non-cooperation, i.e. things which have happened between boardrooms are sorted out effectively as a boardroom issue. And it doesn't give Manchester City a financial advantage, and it doesn't give them a sporting advantage. Whereas the accusations that they've artificially inflated the money coming into the club and they've artificially constricted the costs of running the club has given them a financial advantage, and therefore has given them a potential sporting advantage, and therefore the sanctions would be appropriate to have a points deduction there.
I mean, because what I look at Scotland and what happened with Rangers, one of the big two, and I say the Premier League is going that way, but we've just got 6 instead of 2. They were dumped right down like 4 divisions, weren't they? And had to claw the way back.
They were. I think there were different circumstances there. I mean, this was a very significant tax issue in respect of Rangers. The club did go into liquidation, so the club effectively ceased to exist as a company in its present form. There's no indication that would be the case as far as the owners of Manchester City Football Club are concerned. If we take a look at what happened to Juventus, and I think Juventus is another one which we could use as an analogy. Juventus got kicked down. But it does come down to timing. You could effectively have something similar to that if, for example, Manchester City were given a 60-point deduction. Even with that, they'd probably still stay up, though, if we're honest. If we take a look at the performance of the 3 sides at the bottom of the Premier League this season. But it would make for a fascinating end of the season, which has been the case. I don't think they're as dominant as many other people claim, because they are just winning the Premier League each year.
Yes, yeah, you're right. And like you say, it's just being seen that they're being dealt with. Do you know what I mean? And I don't think that the Premier League necessarily are anti Leicester City. I mean, a lot of us fans feel that way sometimes. I think quite often. I mean, there's a famous news story. I think it was in the Guardian or the Telegraph after he won the Premier League that one of the Big Six directors, or the directors from one of the Big Six clubs, said, we can't allow this to happen again. It wasn't the Premier League that was saying it, and they love that story because obviously, it got the coverage worldwide. But it's like Villa. I mean, they've done well this season. They've got into the Champions League, but there's rumours that they might be being investigated. But how can clubs like Leicester compete? We tried to compete, and I suppose if I blame a little bit some of the players, like Yuri Tielemans, we paid 40 million for him. We didn't get any money because he wouldn't sign a contract, so we lost 40 million basically. Harry Maguire, he signed a contract that said, well, okay, I'll sign the contract, but there'll be certain conditions in it, so at least that way you'll get some money. I don't know what we can do if we want to compete.
I think it is almost impossible to compete. And going back to your comments about the fantastic achievement of Leicester City in 2016, and speaking as a neutral in all of this, we all wanted Leicester to win. We all thought it was great. And that's not just because I'm a Brighton fan and Leo Ulloa was playing for Leicester.
Loved Ulloa. Absolutely,
we loved. We were absolutely delighted for him. There's always some sort of direct or indirect skin in the game for this. But I'm certainly aware that after Leicester won the Premier League, for want of a better phrase, the Big Six, the Sneaky Six, the Super League Six, however you want to refer to them, they put pressure on the Premier League executive to change the way that the TV money was distributed. And the reason why they wanted that is that they wanted to ensure that they got a bigger slice of the pie. And that was their way of indirectly trying to ensure that another Leicester will never occur, or to make it extremely difficult for that to be the case. And the Premier League, if you talk about the Premier League, but who exactly are you referring to? Because actually, you've got a relatively small executive. At the time, it was Richard Scudamore. We've now got Richard Masters and some directors as well. They probably don't want that, but they've also got to be practical, because the Sneaky Six were saying, if you don't give us what we want, we will go off and join the Super League. And they were using the threat of the Super League as a means of extracting further and further concessions from the other clubs in the Premier League. And that's why the rules were changed, because when Leicester won the Premier League in 2016, the international broadcast rights were split evenly between all 20 clubs. And those rules were changed shortly afterwards to give greater emphasis on where you finished, i.e. greater emphasis towards the usual suspects.
Yes. And it's funny because, I mean, and I understand why they feel they should have more money. And I'm trying to sort of be as fair and open as I can. And, I know that sort of viewers in the Far East or in, in the Americas would probably sooner watch Manchester United play Liverpool than Leicester play Nottingham Forest. I mean, we've got to be honest about that. So I get it. But, if these six clubs were just in a league of their own without this, I mean, it's surely that, it's given. I mean, we saw it with Leeds, didn't we? They sailed a lot closer to the sun than we did, as we know. And it took them, and this I think was one of the things with Kuhn Top wanting to sue the Premier League and the EFL due to sort of ambition. How does it affect ambition? And do you think he's right to do that? Do you think that will come back and bite us on the bum for non-cooperation?
I don't necessarily think so. I mean, there is a very good case for saying that if you are the owner of an ambitious stroke aspirational club, and I include Leicester in that, I include Aston Villa in that, I include Newcastle United in that, i.e. people that want to break through the glass ceiling. And that's what we have at present. Fair play to Newcastle for doing it 12 months ago, and fair play to Aston Villa on doing it this season as well. They've done it on merit. But it's very difficult to stay there. And again, wearing my hat as a Brighton fan, we got to 6th last season, and we are in 11th and then the Premier League, other clubs come along and say, "Oh, he's good, I'll have him. He's good, I'll have him. He's good, I'll have him." And then you're back to, keep in your lane. That's the response. And I can understand Leicester's owner feeling aggrieved, and I do think that there is a third way of coming up with a solution, and something along the lines of, if you want to spend more money in terms of financially supporting the club, then you've got to also secure the future of Leicester City. So if you're going to commit yourself to spending an extra £30 million a year on wages for the next 3 years, then this year's wages go up, but you put the other £60 million into a secure account, so that if things go wrong, and nobody wants things to go wrong, and even as a Leicester fan, you don't, the clubs that you consider to be your rivals, you want to see them lose. You want to see their centre forward in the equivalent of the News of the World, in some scandal involving a goat and custard and cocaine or something like that.
I tell you what, it all happens in Brighton, doesn't it?
It's normal Saturday night for us, of course. But you don't want to see them go out of business. Because
I said exactly the same about Derby County. I love the fact that they got relegated. I love the fact that I worked for 3 or 4 years in Bury, and I know what that club meant to the fans of, and the people that lived in Bury. And I do not want, and I, same with Coventry. I hated it really when they didn't have a ground to play at, because Leicester, we were there. We were there once. We nearly went there a second time. You don't want to see clubs go out of business, no matter how much they're a rival.
And I think as a Leicester fan, you probably respect fans of Derby and Coventry more than you would respect somebody in London who's supporting Liverpool or Manchester United because they're famous football clubs. Because to a certain extent, the club picks you. You're born or you're brought up in Leicester, and it's your local club, and you support them through thick and thin. And there tends to be an awful lot of thin. Let's be honest. And the same goes for a fan of Derby. You don't support Derby County or Coventry for the glamour.
I'm clipping that. But no, you're quite right. I mean, I was born in Leicester. My son, who's the biggest football fan of my children, was born in Burnley, and I remember saying to him, "You can support Burnley because that's where you're born, or you can support Leicester because your dad supports Leicester, but you're not supporting Liverpool, Man United, and all those just because they're on telly." We now live down in Bournemouth, and but we're Leicester fans, But I must admit, now I actually thinking that now I wouldn't want to see Coventry and Derby, but I might want to see Leeds. But that's another story for another show. If I want to see Leeds go bum, but no, I don't, seriously. But I mean, a question here from Matthew says here the pundits make us sound like criminals. But Wayne's question is, what was infuriating and bewildering was Chelsea selling 2 hotels to wipe off 150 million of their debts.
I agree, because if I sell something to myself, then how is that profitable?
Yeah.
And if I'm losing huge amounts of money through spending in the transfer market and spending on wages, that's not sustainable. And yet under the profitable and sustainable rules, which the Premier League have agreed not to change, they're saying what Chelsea has done is within those rules, and they're saying that's all fine and dandy. We've seen Aston Villa do it. We've seen Derby County do it. We've seen Sheffield Wednesday do it. In the EFL, and Leicester have just been in the EFL for the last 12 months, you would not have been allowed to do that as far as your PSR calculations are concerned. So we have this ludicrous scenario whereby if Chelsea were relegated, and I would be delighted if that happened, those particular transactions would be excluded. I was asked to do some analysis work for a fairly well-known broadcaster 2 weeks ago, and they gave me a list of 6 clubs who they felt were at risk in relation to PSR issues. So it was published, and then it had to be taken down because Chelsea have used a very similar approach to ensure that they're within the rules. And you go, well, it's within the rules, so therefore it's not cheating. But it goes completely against the principle of having a set of financial controls if there are glaring loopholes in the rules, which make the rules effectively not fit for purpose. And I think that's the position. I can understand the frustration and the anger of Leicester City fans and Everton fans and Nottingham Forest fans to say, well, why didn't we do that? Because if we'd known we could have got away with it, we'd have followed exactly the same route. And I think Chelsea were quite fortunate in terms of the Chelsea owners that they bought the club where it had no mortgages, it had no debts because of what had happened to Abramovich, whereas Everton had mortgaged their property. They had mortgaged Goodison, so therefore they couldn't go down the same route. But Chelsea owners just happened to be beneficiaries of, or indirect beneficiaries of a madman Putin, invading Ukraine and allowing them to get around the rules.
Yeah. I love, just to go back what you were saying about having that fund, because I've said this myself. I've spent many years of my working life working within the travel industry. And if you book a holiday with TUI or Jet2, and I'm old enough to go back to Intersun Holidays and Clarkson's, you're probably much too young to even know who they are. But, the companies that had gone bust in the past, and you used to being a member of ABTA, the Association of British Travel Agents, you had to put the money up. So if that company went bust and everybody was abroad, you'd be guaranteed to be brought home. You would not lose your money. But they had to put money into the fund every year from ABTA to fund that, if you like. So it was like a safety net. Now, you and me know Leicester City aren't going to go bust. We've got owners that are very wealthy, obviously not in the same degree as Man City, Newcastle, but compared to Rochdale and Oldham, we're rich. So we're unlikely to go out of business. But we can't spend the money we've got because of, obviously, PSR. So it would make sense for Top to say, well, okay, then here's 60 million or 100 million. And put that into a bank account, like you say, that is there for if we go over or if we're in trouble, and that can be dipped into.
I've seen various schemes come up, and I think it was, in fact, it was in the political domain as recently as in the last 48 hours of having a transfer levy. So if Leicester wanted to spend more money, could they do so? Yes, but they'd have to go and pay more money in form of a levy. My view is, why not do exactly the same on wages? You can pay whatever wages you want, but and I did the sums, and I reckon if you set a wage cap and you say for every pound that you spend more than that, you're going to pay you make it a high tax, make it 500% tax, and then you split that between the rest of the Premier League. And all of a sudden, if you're going to go and pay an extra 50 million in wages, it's going to cost you 250 million in tax. I think you'd think twice about doing it. But B, it does ensure that all the other clubs in the Premier League get enough money as to make it still a competitive product.
Indeed. I love this from Lookman. He's a Spurs fan. And he said, Kieran, the sneaky six, Spurs being sneaky, still can't win anything. Look, man, you're a hero, mate. You're a hero. Of course, we've got Spurs on the opening day next season. I mean, we've been there because obviously, like you say, we're just down in the EFL, and we've got Jamie Vardy, as you said earlier. Some of our players we had a very high wage bill, even in the Premier League. He was the highest paid player in the EFL last season. Winks, I think, was the second highest paid player. Vardy's obviously just signed a new contract. Now, I don't know the ins and outs of his contract, but I'm sure he hasn't voluntarily took a pay cut. I mean, Rebecca's got a lot of legal bills to pay, hasn't she? So it's going to be
and phone bills, I believe, because she's
using
the phone.
Indeed, I love that. But what do we do? Because if we let him go, we've saved 190 whatever it is £1,000 a week, but we're less likely to stay up.
Yeah, and that's the paradox. Surely a club that has just come up from the EFL, in many respects, deserves extra assistance, because it should be in the Premier League's best interest to avoid what we have seen in the most recent season, where the 3 clubs that were promoted instantly were relegated, and the 3 clubs that were relegated, 2 were promoted and 1 reached the playoff final. I don't think that's good for the product of the Premier League to have this degree of recycling. And one of the ways of addressing that is to provide some form of bounce back assistance for those clubs who have been promoted. But are the other clubs in the Premier League going to vote for that? Why would Bournemouth, Wolves, Crystal Palace, Brighton, and Fulham, why would they vote for something which would help Leicester to stay up in their first season back in the Premier League? Because by definition, it increases the chances of those other clubs being relegated, and everybody looks after number 1. And I'm not saying that that's right or wrong, but it's what we do in our lives. I like my colleagues that I work with, but if my boss calls me in and says, tell you what, I'm going to give you a 10 grand pay rise, but don't tell anybody else, I'm going to take it and not tell anybody else. Now, the chances of that happening as a teacher are close to 0. In fact, they are 0. But you get the principle.
I get it. I get it totally. I suppose the thing is, with the likes of Wolves, Bournemouth, those sorts of clubs, that they have been in that position, and they could possibly very well be in that position again. If we have a look at sort of parachute payments, all right, we haven't. Please, if you can clear this up for me. When we got relegated at the end of the season before last, do we get the parachute payments for that first season, or is it only the season after when we know whether we're going back up or not?
No. Leicester will have received parachute payments for the season 2023-24 of approximately 43 million pounds. Now that compares to the EFL TV deal for a club such as Ipswich, for example, who were also promoted. Ipswich would have got 8 million pounds. So there is a significant difference. The parachute payments were introduced, and let's go back to this word. What do parachutes do? They stop you from crashing to the earth and dying. Well, that's the objective. If you are going from an incredibly successful Premier League to a modestly successful EFL Championship, you need something to acclimatise, because I've got the numbers in front of me. The only way that a club could effectively survive and make the same level of losses in the EFL as they do in the Championship is if you had 80% reductions in wages, and that ain't going to work. No. And again, what I would do here is I was fortunate. I wrote a book on football finance, and I was lucky enough to be able to talk to some chief executives of clubs who had been in the Premier League and gone down and similar. And one of them said to me, take a look at this scenario. It's the 3rd week in January. We're 18th in the Premier League. We've got 15 Premier League games left of this season. I've got a chance to sign a striker. The manager's convinced this striker is going to cost us 15 million quid. He wants 40 grand a week, and he wants a £500,000 bonus if we stay up. I can probably persuade him that if we don't stay up, that 40 grand a week will pay him 30 grand in the Championship. He's currently playing in Spain, he's playing in Portugal. He's got no emotional connection to my club, so why should he come here? It's a money-based transaction. I said, for a 25% reduction when I get to the Championship, he'll probably sign for me, because 30 grand a week is still probably more than he's picking up at present. If I have to say to him, Pablo, Jose, whatever the name's going to be, you're on 40 grand a week for 15 games. If we go down, I need to put you on 7 grand a week. He ain't going to come, and therefore we are going to get relegated, and you're going to have a less competitive Premier League on the back of that. So parachute payments are far from perfect, but actually they make the Premier League more competitive, and the Premier League is our premier product. if you get rid of parachute payments, you will probably have a more competitive Championship and an even less competitive Premier League. And look, I'm a Brighton fan. I hate Crystal Palace, but
Yes.
I also say fair play to Crystal Palace for going to Anfield and beating Liverpool and then beating Manchester United 4-0 and beating Villa and beating Newcastle United. And they did that because they're able to attract players who wouldn't come if they had to take 80% pay cuts if the club goes down.
It's a weird one because when you've explained it like that, I get it, because I although we've just been the beneficiary of parachute payments, I was thinking it did give us an unfair advantage, as you said, in the Championship. I mean, for Leicester, there was that confusion, wasn't there? That, you know, and you wonder sort of whether people that are running these organisations really know what they're doing, because the EFL tried to charge us, and then we proved straight away that they couldn't. Then the Premier League were trying to charge us. Then they were trying to get together and trying to charge us. It gets confusing. But do you think that this can be sorted quickly? Because when I think, look, if we're going to get a points deduction, we're going to take a points deduction. Let's take it on the chin. At least it's the start of the season. Forest and Everton, 2/3 of the season had gone when they suddenly got the point. At least we hopefully will have the majority of the season to do it. How quickly do you think this could actually get put through?
I think there are sort of administrative and logistical challenges. Everybody's on holiday. It's June. That's when footballers, football coaches, football managers, football executives, that's when they all go on holiday. Or they're in Germany, scouting for players, trying to sign deals and so on. So it's actually quite a difficult task for the Premier League. And the Premier League comes in for a lot of criticism, some of which is justified, a lot of which isn't justified. They're an easy target. They've got to go through due process. They've now got to go to Leicester City and say, we now want to see your accounts, because now that you're back in the Premier League, you've got to submit your accounts for us. Having seen the accounts, they've then got to go and say, well, do we think that you've broken the rules? If that is the case, what will happen is that there will be a period of consultation between the football club and the Premier League for 48 hours, because are Leicester simply just going to accept the charges and agree effectively a tariff straight away, because that means it doesn't have to go to a commission. The Everton case cost the Premier League £5 million in legal fees.
Wow.
That's £5 million which is not going to football. That's £5 million which is going to the accountancy profession, the legal profession, the management consultancy profession, but it ain't going to football. Could there be a quick out of court settlement between the two parties? The chances are no, because Leicester might say, well, we don't think we've broken the rules, so therefore they decide to defend themselves. So all of these processes have to be got through, and then you potentially could be up on the charges from a commission. And I think the frustrating thing from the perspective of Leicester City Football Club, but equally Leicester City football fans, is that uncertainty is a horrible thing. It's the same as in respect of your manager. It's the same when you know that a player might be leaving or might become. We like certainty in all aspects of life.
Yeah.
We love football because of uncertainty, because that gives us jeopardy, that gives us emotion, which can be very high or can be very low, depending on what happens over 90 minutes. But in terms of finances, points deductions, fines, all of sort of the admin, there's no joy in any of that. It only tends to be misery with a potential, well, it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. And I think that was the reaction of Nottingham Forest fans, for example, last season.
One thing I've got to ask you is, and I don't understand this at all, but Enzo went to Chelsea and we got £10 million compensation, or €10 million, whatever it was, compensation.
Yeah.
Now, if we'd have gone and got Corberon, we'd have had to have played West Brom compensation. Obviously. Now, if we sign Cooper, and it looks like it is going to be Cooper, we don't have any compensation to pay because he's obviously out of work. And what I've read, and I'm not saying this is true, I'm just saying what I've read, that because of the 10 million that we have got from Chelsea for Enzo is the equivalent of selling a player for 50 million.
Yeah, that's nonsense. I've read that. I know the person that's written it, and he's misinterpreted the rules. If you sold, let's say if you sell Jamie Vardy for 50 million before the 30th of June, let's say the 30th of June is our cut-off date. The profit is the difference between the sale proceeds, which is the 50 million, less the accounting value of Jamie Vardy. Now, given what he signed in 2015 for, was it £1 million?
Yes. Yeah.
So his accounting value will be buttons. So actually, you would be looking at a profit of 50 million. We then get into the rather technical, and I can assure you, extremely tedious, because I do this for a living, issue of how to calculate profit on a player sale. And all of a sudden, I think the media have cottoned on that if you sell an academy player, or if you sell a player who's been at the club for many years, you make a huge profit. Whereas if we took a look at Chelsea, for example, they signed Lukaku. Let's say they signed Lukaku for 100 million. It was close to that. He was on a 5-year contract. You say, well, we're 3/5 of the way through the contract, so you've only got 2/5 remaining. 2/5 of 100 million gives me a figure of 40 million. So unless they sell him for at least 40 million, they're going to lose money. So it is very technical. I'm not going to criticise the journalist who wrote that, because A, I know him quite well, and B, he's a football journalist. I'm an accounting teacher, and I wouldn't know how to write an article for a newspaper, and he wouldn't necessarily say that his strong area is calculating.
That's fine. I mean, that's understandable. I mean, it is very confusing, and things, I suppose, do get reported wrong. But I'd read it, and I thought I just couldn't understand. And I've been quoting it for about 3 or 4 days, and I couldn't understand how that worked out. So as Matthew says here, then, do we have to sell? Is that the only way? And obviously, we've only got a couple of weeks left until the end of June, as it is. From what you know, are we in such a bad situation that we're going to have to go and sell? And I'm thinking Dewsbury Hall is our main asset. And like I say, because he'd come through the academy, so we've got no purchase fees there. Probably, we would hopefully try and get 50 million for him. Is it worth us doing that? Or is it just worth us saying, well, we're going to get points deducted anyway. If we keep Kieran Dewsbury Hall, we've got a better chance of staying up and therefore earning more money in the long term. Right.
I think we have to sort of separate out here 2 issues. In terms of Leicester potentially being in breach of PSR for the 3 years to the end of 22-23, it makes no difference what happens in the summer of 24. So you've either overspent or you haven't. So in the sense of, could you be up on a second set of charges? And remember, that's what we saw with respect to Everton. And Everton potentially could be up on a third set of charges for all we know. Then it could be that a sale in this financial year would assist the club. So that's that position. So let's say that you get X points deduction for the 3 years to 23. Sale of a player before the end of the year could mean that you don't have to go and have to have a second point. So remember, that's what happened with Everton. They had a 6-point deduction, then they had a 4-point deduction, which they clawed back some of those points. To overall end up with an 8-point deduction, but they still stayed up.
I think I asked you this earlier, but I say all this legal action that we're taking against Premier League and EFL, is that deemed as not cooperating? Because obviously Everton got, and then that's the other thing, I suppose, you get, is it 9 points if you go out of business, but 10 points for breaking PSR?
It's, I think that the default position, if we look at what happened to Portsmouth, was Portsmouth got a 9-point deduction for going into administration. It now appears to be the case is that if you have breached PSR, you get an automatic 6 points penalty. And then again, it's a bit, I always use sort of the analogy of a speeding ticket. If I'm doing 85 on the motorway, the judge might say, I'm going to give you £150 fine and a 2 points penalty on your license. If I'm doing 140, he's going to say, well, that's a £5,000 fine and 8 points. So what appears to be the case, I think it's for every £6.5 million over the PSR limit, you get one further point being deducted.
Right. So I'm reading anything up to 15-point deductions for Leicester. And I think you alluded to that, I think, when you did the bit for the for Leicestershire Live, the Leicester Mercury.
Yeah, I've seen that same article, but I don't know how they've done those calculations. And I think here we have to be very, very cautious and also remember that people are looking for headlines, because rightly or wrongly, headlines work.
Yeah.
So, and in a media environment which is losing money, the more lurid the headline, the more clicks you're going to get, either positive or negative.
I do a radio show in the morning, and I read the headlines out because I do, like, the front pages and what have you, and I do a clip where I go inside the papers and I read the headline that it says on the website, and I'm trying to find what part of the story alludes to the headline.
Yeah, absolutely. So when it comes to PSR, you start off with your accounting calculations, and then you say, well, for every pound that Leicester spent on infrastructure, that gets knocked back. That's excluded. Every pound that you spend on the academy, Leicester have got a Cat 1 academies, which is going to cost somewhere in the region of probably £7 to £20 million a year to run. Some of Chelsea's academy costs an absolute fortune, but that's because they spend most of the season nicking other teams' players.
Don't we know it? Brighton and Leicester, we're Chelsea B teams, aren't we? Well, feeder teams, aren't we? Yeah.
If you've got a women's team and that loses money, those losses are excluded from your PSR calculation. If you've got a community scheme, and the community schemes run by Premier League clubs are absolutely magnificent, by the way. They genuinely make a difference to people's lives and people's welfare, and they make a huge social impact. Well, those costs are excluded. So it's not as simple as saying, let's take a look at Leicester's 3 most recent sets of accounts, and I've got them in front of me here, and it's saying, well, that's £215 million. The limit's 105, so Leicester 120 over. That we'll add on a bit for this, that, and the other, and we think it's going to be 15 million. It's likely to be more nuanced than that, but all the same, it doesn't look great if those numbers are a genuine starting point. You've got to have an awful lot of add backs to make things better.
I think the other thing that annoys me is, and again, I don't know whether this is true, it's what I've sort of heard and reported on, and that is that the season before we went down, we'd qualified for the Europa League for 2 seasons running, and we were actually warned by UEFA that it was COVID, so there was a bit of an allowance there, but that if we qualified for Europe again, that we might be in trouble with UEFA. And in fairness to Top, he didn't. That was a season when we didn't buy anybody. We only bought about FaZe at the end of the season because Fofana went off to Chelsea, believe it or not, on a 6-year deal. That's handy, isn't it? But because we did that to try and comply with the rules, we then had a bad season and got relegated. And we were almost like being punished twice.
Yeah, again, I've got the figures in front of me here. In 21-22, at the end of that season, Leicester's squad cost £402 million. By the end of the following season, when Leicester were relegated, the squad cost only 264. So that's effectively a third of the cost of your squad had disappeared. You had a huge negative net spend. All of these things you can say, well, look, the club was acknowledging that it was under PSR pressure. I think what's come back to bite Leicester was that, like many clubs, they probably budgeted to finish 8th or 9th, because you would have done, and they didn't. And every place in the Premier League is worth an extra £3.5 million in prize money. So if you're 10 places below budget, that's 35 million quid that you've been hit with. It looks here, and you know, I don't see contracts, and I also always defend players' wages. It looks as if there were no relegation avoidance bonuses embedded into contracts because Leicester had the 7th highest wage bill. The wage bill went up in 22-23 despite the club being relegated. And you know, under those circumstances, I guess it's an awkward situation because as we go back to an earlier part of our conversation, if Leicester are ambitious, you don't want to have these types of clauses because all of the wage issues should be on bonuses for getting into Europa League or Champions League and so on. And I don't think anybody at Leicester envisaged relegation. So therefore, putting in relegation clawbacks in terms of wages was something that they didn't decide to do, or they didn't think it would go down well with the players. That didn't look good when you're trying to negotiate a deal with a player. And it has come back to haunt the club, I think, quite severely.
Do you think, looking at Leicester, and it is from the outside, so I accept that we are, when you look at how many players we've bought, and like you said earlier, part of the running of our club is that we sold one player for a good sum every season. The Harry Maguire one, the Ben Chilwell, the Riyad Mahrez. The money we made on those is unbelievable. But then we also look at, as I said earlier, Youri Tielemans, 40 million, got nothing for him. Kagla Soyuncu went on a free. Slimani, he was, I think, 40 million. We didn't get a penny for him. Is it a badly run club?
I don't think so. If you take a look again, I'm the boring accounting teacher, but over the last 5 years in which Leicester City were in the Premier League, their net spend over the total period was £70 million. That's not a lot of money.
No,
that's an average of 14 million. So it's I think the club did trade. I think the argument could have been they could have perhaps sold Tielemans 12 months earlier or 24 months earlier, when perhaps he was more amenable to leaving, as opposed to exploiting the benefits that leaving on a Bosman brings to an individual. And it does. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
And some players are quite happy to go with 18 months, 2 years left on the contract because they want to play elsewhere, and it's still worth their while because they'll pick up more wages at Villa than perhaps you're getting at Leicester and so on. So it swings and roundabouts. Players come in on long-term contracts. Sometimes it works. So if you say, well, why didn't they sign him on a 7-year contract? Well, he might have been crap. If you look at Chelsea signing Enzo Fernandez from Portugal, he's on an 8.5. Is it a 9-year contract?
Yeah.
You've got Mudryk on an 8-year.
6 years, and he's been injured since he went there.
Yeah. So that's an awful long time to be paying out the wages for somebody that's not delivering, and also on wages that nobody else is prepared to match. So you can't get rid of the player.
Well, I was just going to say that exactly. We've seen that as well. Don't expect you to name names at all, but are Leicester going to be the only club that are in trouble this season, or do you think there's potential for other clubs to be going down the same route?
I was asked to do this analysis by a very well-known media outlet on 6 clubs. 3 of those clubs are in the Midlands.
Wow.
I'll say no more than that.
No, that's fine. Well, one immediately springs to mind, but no. As I said, though, we're back in the race. We might be starting off from the pit lane, but at least we're in the race. And that's all good. Last question here. Had we not come up, we know the EFL would. Oh no, sorry, I've got one other question after this as well. So I do apologise for this one. If we hadn't come up, I suppose financially it would have been worse for us, and the EFL would have battered us as well.
Yeah, I think there is a very high chance that had Leicester remained in the Championship, the EFL would now say, we're going to assess you for the 3 years to the 30th, to 23-24,
Yeah.
and you've made significant losses, let's have a chat. Let's come into our office. So I think there would have been sanctions without doubt.
Yeah, because I'm thinking, I've now said, I mean, to me, the important thing about this season, and that's why I'm quite happy with getting Cooper in, because I think he could keep us in this league. He's got the experience in this league. The EFL are like the child catcher and chitty chitty bang bang with the big net just waiting for us to fall through and catch us. So it's so important we stay up. How would this affect? Because it's Fatawu, I mean, obviously, our player of the season last season. What an amazing. And the fact that he's costing us, I think it's 15 million, is wow. Again, he's going to be one we'll probably, I know we'll sell in 3 or 4 years to Chelsea. It's preordained. But obviously, one of the agreements when we signed him on loan is that if we got promoted, we had to buy him. And I think they've the club has come out and said, Lisbon has come out and said, yep, that he's going to Leicester. We still have to buy him, don't we? We can't not buy him. And I think I'm saying that from a position of I still want to buy him.
Yeah, what you quite often see with players who are on loan, and we saw this, I think, with another former Leicester player, Anthony Knockhart. He was on loan at Fulham, and there was what we refer to as an obligation to buy clause. Yeah. I don't think he ever played for Fulham in the Premier League, but they didn't have a choice. There's also a very famous case involving, from what sounds like a club that you're not very keen on, with Leeds United and Jean-Kevin Augustin, who played for Leeds for 43 minutes during the promotion season. Leeds were promoted, and therefore the clause kicked in that they had to buy him. Leeds said, we don't want to buy him. And then they tried to get rid of the player, and the players sued Leeds United. The former club has sued Leeds United. I think it's cost Leeds somewhere in the region of £40 million for a player that played less than one half for them in his Leeds career.
Wow.
So it can be the case. Clearly neither of us have access to the small print, and ultimately it's nothing to do with us. It's between the club and the player, the former club. But if it is an obligation to buy, and the obligating event is promotion to the Premier League, then Leicester have to pay for it.
And we can't be told we can't buy him. I think is what I'm getting at as well.
Yeah. It's security for Leicester. It's security for the player. It's security for the other club.
That's the good thing. You said right at the start, I mean, we said, you've got the podcast, The Price of Football, and the link is in the description below. You've also got the book on second edition, The Price of Football, still available on Amazon, guys, $12.99. I do my homework, you see. And as Wayne said there, this is interesting. If you think this is interesting, check the book out. Wayne, we could be talking for another 5 hours on this one. It's just going on and on and on.
I'm sure some people probably feel it's been going on for 5 hours.
Well, no, this is the thing. I mean, I had a gentleman, Gavin, and forgive me, Gavin, because I can't remember his surname, that used to be on the EFL board, that came on to try and talk through it, but he was limited and he admitted he was limited in what he could talk about. I've been wanting to do this for ages because there is so many questions that Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're back now.
It's my internet here. I think. Yeah, no, I mean, so Gavin, bless him to bits. He did what he could, but he had limited knowledge. So I've been wanting to do this for ages, and just to try and clear some things up. Like I say, we can't stop what's going to happen. Whatever's going to happen will happen, but at least we're in the race, even if we have got a tyre that's letting some air out a bit. So. But look, Kieran, thank you so very much for coming on. I appreciate you giving up your time to do this, and you have made it a little bit clearer. I've got to say, I do understand things a little bit more now, even if I'm not reassured at all.
Yeah, I don't think you can ever be reassured by an accounting teacher.
No. I don't think so either. But look, all I can hope is that at the end of the season we're sat in 17th place, and then I'll be happy. Good luck to Brighton.
Thank you.
As well, both two of my children were at the University of Sussex, which is in Brighton.
Right. Fantastic.
And
good uni.
I had many a very nice. I love the lanes. In fact, I got a picture of the lanes up on my wall that one of my kids bought me. Love that, lovely atmosphere, and it's the same with Brighton. I mean, you look at your history. You're playing in a sports field or sports stadium, weren't you, for a while?
We were, it's about 9 seasons. No, longer than that. It was about 12 seasons. Yeah, it wasn't fun. But
no.
I think it's sort of testament that football is all about ambition and dreaming. And if you'd have told me when we were playing in League 3 against Doncaster at home that we'd be doing a double over Ajax of Amsterdam, I would have phoned for an ambulance for you.
Yeah, but that's it. Football gives you the chance to dream, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Even if it costs a bloody fortune. Kieran, mate, go have a great night. Thank you so much for coming on. Really do appreciate it. Good luck to Brighton next season, except obviously when you play Leicester. And maybe we'll speak again. Thank you very much.
All the best. Up the Foxes.
Take care. Thank you. Oh, a lovely man. Thank you so very much to Kieran there. Really do appreciate him coming on. Just get a few last minute comments here. So, do check out that one, Wayne. It is on Amazon and it is called The Price of Football, second edition, $12.99 on Prime, 1-day delivery. So you can have it tomorrow. Sorry, Craig, I've just seen this here. Evening, Chris and Kieran. Sorry, mate. I was having to let him go because I know he was on a time restraint and we are coming up to the hour, but I do know you were on a show, weren't you? So it feels like clubs are being restricted who are ambitious, i.e. Villa, but Big Six are bending rules to avoid PSR. That is a very good question, but check back, watch the show back, mate. And I think you'll find that question was, and a lot of what was being said, if I'm honest. Joe, hi, Joe. Have to be punished for buying. Yeah, it is. And again, that's something that Kieran said. You no club, especially in Leicester's position that we had been, no club in that sort of position budgets for getting relegated. Relegation wasn't even on our line of sight, was it? I mean, yes, this season it is, and it has to be in our line of sight because of the position we've been in. Burnley's last year, Sheffield United, Luton's, they all had that. But we had, we'd been up for sort of 9 years. Who expect we would have been in Europe? We'd won the bloody thing. We'd won the FA Cup, Community Shield. We never thought we were going to get relegated. Matthew, appreciate your kind words, sir. Thank you so very, very much. I think it was brilliant having him on. I really, really do. Craig, you're a gentleman, sir. Excellent podcast and something I listen to on a regular basis. Oh, yeah, on Kieran's. I thought you were talking about my podcast then. I was going to say, thank you very much. But of course you're not. Kieran makes the numbers, which I don't understand, more simple. He does, doesn't he? He is very, very good. He's got a lot. He made a lot of sense today. Yeah, my mic did go. Ant is in. Hi, Ant. How you doing? Do go and check his Ant's Leicester fan channel out if you have not already. It's a great channel. On a scale of 1 to potato, how are we? Look, great manager coming in. I like him. I did a show earlier. It's 99% Cooper. And if you're interested, by the way, tomorrow at 5 o'clock, guys, tomorrow at 5, I have a lovely man, and I keep him in the basement, Matt Shepherdson. Craig knows him. Lovely man. He's a Nottingham Forest fan. He's going to give us a lowdown on Steve Cooper. The show will be called Cooper, Is He All That? 5 o'clock tomorrow before the England game. Check it out. Everything, we're telling us all about Steve Cooper. Yeah, thanks so much. And tomorrow night as well, of course, at 7:30. We should be finished by then with Steve Cooper. 7:30, it's England. We will be covering the England game. And Craig will be joining me for that. So looking forward to that, Craig. So, like I say, 5 o'clock tomorrow. Haven't got the artwork for it, but it will be Cooper, Izzy, all that at 5 o'clock. And then England will be coming up at 7:30 as we take on Denmark and Kasper Schmeichel. Don't forget this one, The Silence of the Rams, starring Steve Walsh. Talked us through the great game where it was Derby 1, Leicester City 2. We got promoted to the Premier League. They didn't. And then also you can get that on catch up on LTID TV on YouTube. Also in the catch up, you can get another classic match revisited. Leicester City against Shrewsbury, 5-2 FA Cup quarter-finals. 8 goals. No, there's not. 7 goals. Let me get that right. It can't add up. It's a good job I'm not an accountant, isn't it? 7 goals, 4 goalkeepers. 2 of those goalkeepers didn't let any goals in. How did it work out? If you don't know, check that one out as well on LTID TV. And if you want to see 2 guys nearly attacking each other, well, I was nearly attacking Craig. 2 fans down the pub from last night. The sound, few problems with the sound because the pub we go to, the Cherry Fox, was having some redecoration done. Let me just put it that way. So it meant that we weren't in our normal corner, and there was a lot. Well, the football was on. The football was on. So you can check all those out, and of course, watch this back if you want to know more. Don't ask me. I wasn't making notes, but a lot of interesting facts there. Your shows are good as well, mate. Bit more exciting than the other channel. What can I say? What can I say? Oh, here we go. No, I can't. You behave yourself, Craig. I'm not even doing that one. I can unmod you on that one. Chloe Louise turned up the TV too loud. He did indeed. Look, thanks very much. If you're new, please do smash the likes button on this. It's a brilliant show. Kieran's been great. What a gentleman. What a gentleman. It's great when people can come on and put it in plain English and speak to us and explain things to us. Watch it again and you'll be able to find out all about how Leicester stand. And you've not put my mind at rest, I'll tell you. Smash the likes if you're new. Please subscribe. Really do appreciate it. Thank you so very much. And if you're listening via your favourite podcast platform, thank you very, very much for lending me your ears. Be back tomorrow at 5 o'clock talking all things Steve Cooper. Don't be sure to be there. Thanks a lot, guys. Good night.
Thanks for watching. These videos are tremendous. You better like them too or I'll be back.
This podcast is proud to be part of the TalkSport Fan Network. TalkSport. Powered by fans.
That will conclude this evening's entertainment.